lot of schools are starting to rethink cell phones. Parents are questioning screen time, and many of us are trying to figure out where the line should be in our own homes. Because the truth is, a lot of us didn't grow up navigating smartphones, joining social media, and everything our sons now carry around in their pockets. So, how do we help them use their phones wisely without making every conversation about rules and restrictions? In this episode of Raising Boys with Purpose, we're talking about phones, distractions, boundaries, and how we can help our sons develop the judgment they'll eventually need to manage technology for themselves. Because one day we won't be setting the limits, they will. Welcome to Raising Boys with Purpose, a Christian parenting podcast for moms raising teens and young adult sons. I'm Brooke, a boy mom and parenting coach, and here we talk about raising sons, building character, and preparing our boys for adulthood with confidence and faith. For more encouragement and conversation throughout the week, come join our Raising Boys with Purpose Facebook group. The link for all my social media is in the description. Schools around the country are starting new phone policies. Each morning as students arrive, some are required to check in their phones or put them away for a school day. I've seen several different systems for how schools are handling it, but most of them seem to come back to the same concerns: distraction and mental health. And parents have mixed feelings about it. Some aren't comfortable with their child not having access to a phone during the day because they want to be able to reach them in an emergency. Others are relieved to see schools putting some limits around phones because they've watched how distracting they can be. And I can understand both sides, because phones give us something we really value as parents: the ability to stay connected with our sons. But at the same time, they become so much more than a way to call home. Now, both of my boys got cell phones in middle school. They were excited. They could stay in touch with their friends, and we felt better knowing we could reach them when they were away from us. Looking back, though, I wish we had done some things a little differently. We didn't grow up with cell phones. When they first became part of our lives, we thought of them primarily as a way to communicate. You called family, friends, or work, and you had them in case of an emergency. But as technology advanced, phones became something very different for our boys. They were still communication, but they were also entertainment. Then came social media, video games, notifications, and endless streams of things competing for their attention. And I don't think we fully understood where all of that was going when we handed them their first phones. Today, teens spend hours every day looking at screens. Sometimes I hear numbers and I think, how does that even happen? But then I think about how easy it is for us to pick up our own phones to check one thing and start scrolling through a few reels, and then suddenly 30 minutes have gone by. Do that several times throughout the day, and those hours don't seem quite as impossible. There are real concerns about what all of that screen time can mean for our sons: mental health, cyberbullying, shortened attention spans, and simply being distracted from what's going on around them. That distraction is one of the reasons we're seeing schools rethink phones in the classroom. Kids aren't necessarily passing notes anymore. They're texting. Instead of listening to the teacher, they may be watching a reel or checking a notification. And now there's another layer that we didn't have growing up. Almost anything can be recorded. A student or teacher can have an embarrassing moment recorded and shared online within minutes. Sometimes kids may even play up to the camera because they know there's an audience waiting to react. That changes the environment our sons are growing up in. There's also the question of who they're communicating with online. Someone can become a friend very quickly without our sons really knowing who that person is or what their intentions are. We've heard stories of teens being pulled into online scams, blackmail schemes, or bullying situations that started through a phone. And then there are all those notifications constantly asking for their attention. A text, a comment, a reel, a game, another notification. Every one of them gives our sons another opportunity to stop what they're doing and look at the screen. But here's the part I think we sometimes forget. We struggle with this too. As I was working on this episode, I had a notification come through that broke my concentration. And I thought, well, there it is. If I have trouble ignoring my phone when I'm trying to work, why would I expect my son to automatically know how to manage that distraction? Have you noticed how much time your son spends on his phone? Does it concern you? Or have you mostly thought this is just the world they live in now? Maybe the answer is a little of both. Because phones aren't going away. Technology is going to continue to be part of our sons' lives. So maybe the question isn't simply, how do we keep our sons off their phones? Maybe it's, how do we help them learn to use their phones wisely? I think that question changes the conversation a little. Instead of looking for one perfect set of phone rules that every family should follow, we can start thinking about what matters most in our own homes. If safety and communication are important to us, we may want our sons to have their phones when they're away from home or out with friends. At the same time, if we're seeing that entertainment is taking over too much of their time, maybe we need some boundaries around how and when phones are used. That could look differently in every family. Some families don't allow phones in bedrooms at night. Others have limits on certain apps or screen time. Some have places where everyone puts their phones during meals or family time. I recently saw a clip of Kylie Kelsey talking about how she and her husband are thinking about cell phones as their children get older. She mentioned the possibility of having shared kitchen cell phones rather than immediately giving each child a personal phone. I thought that was interesting. I'd even seen phone holders with those long curly cords that make a smartphone look like an old school kitchen phone. There's something kind of funny about using new technology to recreate the phones we grew up with. And I see how something like that might work well when children are younger and then simply become part of the family's normal routine. But what if your son is already a teenager and already has his own phone? That's where I think conversation becomes really important. There may be a few things that you know are non-negotiable for your family. That's okay. We're still the parents. But there may also be some areas where we can invite our sons into the conversation. We can explain what we're concerned about and why. We can ask what they think is reasonable. And then we can actually listen to their answers. They may not agree with everything we say. They may think we're being overly cautious. And if they've had unrestricted access for a while, any new boundaries may take some adjustment. But we're doing more than establishing phone rules. We're giving them practice, thinking about their own technology habits. Because eventually, no one is going to be standing there telling them to put the phone away. They'll have to make that decision themselves. So think about how phones work in your home right now. Do you have any guidelines your son is expected to follow? Are there areas where things are working pretty well? Are there places where you think it might be time for a conversation? And what are the schools in your area doing? Are students still allowed to have their phones in the classroom? Or are you beginning to see some of these new policies too? This is one of those parenting issues where I don't think there's one answer that fits every family. But I do think it's worth talking about. Technology is going to keep changing. There will always be a new app, a new platform, or something else competing for our son's attention. We aren't going to be able to protect them from every mistake or every bad decision they might encounter online. But we can keep the conversation open. We can talk about what they're seeing. We can help them recognize situations that don't feel right. And most importantly, we can make sure they know they can come to us when something happens. Even if they clicked something they shouldn't have, responded to someone they didn't know, or simply made a mistake. I don't want fear of getting in trouble to be the reason a son tries to handle a serious situation alone. Our sons are going to make mistakes, sometimes because they're curious, sometimes because they don't understand the consequences, and sometimes simply because they're still learning. That's part of growing up. And maybe that's the bigger goal with phones too. We're not just deciding how much screen time they should have today. We're helping them learn how to manage distractions, make wise decisions, recognize danger, and take responsibility for the technology they use. Because eventually, we won't be setting the limits for them. They'll be setting those limits for themselves. And every conversation we have now is another opportunity to help prepare them for that day. That's what we're doing as we raise our boys with purpose. We're preparing our sons not just for the world they're living in today, but for the adults they're becoming. If this episode of Raising Boys with Purpose encouraged you, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of this podcast. And if you're raising a teen or young adult son and want encouragement and practical guidance, come join us in the Raising Boys with Purpose Facebook community. The link is below. Thanks for being here today. Now grab your iced coffee, hug your son, and remember, you're raising him with purpose.